All right, welcome everyone. This is the Leadership and Management webinar series. My name is Shannon McDonald and I am the Associate Director of Corporate and Community Relations at UC San Diego Extension. I'm so happy to see you all here today, and we have a wonderful presentation ahead of us. So today we are going to be talking about lean leadership, creating a culture of continuous improvement. And we have wonderful speakers for you today. Tracy O'Rourke is a Chief Innovation Officer at GoLeanSixSigma.com. And she has been an extension instructor for many years now. And we're so thrilled to have her expertise, not only at Extension, but for this webinar and for all that she does in the community. And then Cindy Hansen will also be joining us today. She is Associate Director at UC San Diego Extension. Today we're going to do something a little bit different than previous webinars. That if you have joined us in the past, we're going to be doing a fireside chat more or less. So excited for this new format for today and all the content that they're going to be sharing. So before we get started, I just wanted to share our agenda with you. Again, welcome. I wanted to make sure you knew that this session is being recorded and will be made available to you after today's presentation. If you're attending today, you'll receive a link in a couple, probably about a week's time or 2 weeks' time. But after today, you'll also be receiving the PowerPoint presentation or the few slides that are being available today and any additional resources that Tracy may have. Then we're going to get into a little bit about UC San Diego Extension just for a moment, and then we're going to kick off this wonderful presentation we have. Just a reminder, we will be doing question and answer session via chat today. We're also, because of the format, we're also going to be encouraging that the Q&A is done via chat, and additional comments happen and any commentary that you may want to chime in on is done through the chat box today.
Great.
Okay, so now on to a little bit about, sorry about that. Okay, a little bit about UC San Diego Extension. We are the continuing education arm of UC San Diego. We've been around for many, many years, almost 60 years now, almost as long as the university itself. And we focus on professional development and personal enrichment. And what we really encourage is learning today and apply tomorrow. So all our, most of our programs are practical in nature. They're taught by experts in the field. And we really focus in on the practical experience. We have both online formats, hybrid formats, live online sessions, and when we can, we'll be returning in class. We have a variety of different topics we teach, from business, science, and tech to education, healthcare, and arts and humanities. So this Leadership and Essential series is brought to you by our Corporate Education Department, and I just wanted to let you know that topics such as Lean, Six Sigma, process improvement, project management, and more can all be brought to your corporation or organization if you have a group of employees that you need to train. So it's private, turnkey, flexible, so we can really develop any of these programs to fit the format that your organization needs. I just wanted to remind you that we have the Leadership and Management webinar series, which you're joining us here today. We have more topics coming up in the next few weeks, as you will see here. So I hope you join us for future sessions. You'll also be able to find out, as part of our Leadership and Management Essential series, which this webinar series is a part of, we have a variety of different leadership and management options, from certificate programs, workshops, and more. So I hope you do join us and check out our webpage, extension.ucsd.edu/levelup. Just a reminder that all past webinars that we've done are posted on this page. So please, I do encourage you to go ahead and take a peek. All right, now on with the show. I want to present Tracy O'Rourke and Cindy Hansen. They're going to take it over from here. And here is Lean Leadership, creating a culture of continuous improvement.
Hi, how is everybody doing? My name is Cindy Hansen. I direct the Strategic Innovation Department here at UC San Diego Extension, and I also have the privilege of working with Tracy O'Rourke on the Lean Six Sigma programs. I've known Tracy for about, I don't know, Tracy, how many, 11 years?
Around 11 years, yes.
It hurts. It's so long I've known Tracy. We actually first met when I was a program manager for the Lean Six Sigma programs. And since then, as I mentioned, I moved on to innovation, but still I'm very close with the Lean Six Sigma programs, and just so honored to be here with Tracy today. Tracy?
I'm happy to be here as well. Thank you, Cindy. So I have been doing Lean Six Sigma process improvement for, well, since the late 90s. I started at GE Appliances when Jack Welch was at the helm, and started there with doing process improvement, and very quickly started moving into consulting and helping other organizations with process improvement. I really enjoyed my time at GE Appliances. Even though we were a manufacturing organization, I spent a lot of time helping people with their administrative processes, non-manufacturing processes, service processes. And that was really fun and interesting. We had a great experience doing that. So as Shannon said, I teach in the UC San Diego Extension Lean Six Sigma Greenbelt Instructor Program, and I'm also going to be the instructor for the new Lean Six Sigma Leader course that's going to be starting in August as well. So I'm very happy to be here. And there's lots of people on this call from San Diego. Woo, woo, because I'm also in San Diego.
So originally, but I'm excited.
We get excited about San Diegans, but we are very excited because there's people from all over the world calling in, and we are happy to have you.
So Tracy, we're here to talk about lean leadership. So I'm assuming we have people from all over. I, of course, cannot see any of the chat box. That's okay. I'm not technically advanced. But
so we've got people all over. So in Oceanside, Olympia, Washington, Colorado. So please continue to put your Sherman Heights, Indiana. So
whoa.
From all over.
Oh my God. So we're reaching everywhere. Oh my God. So I'm assuming because you're here today, it's safe to assume that you are at least familiar with the term lean or Lean Six Sigma even. However, before we dive in, Tracy, can you please just tell us what is lean, really?
Sure. I like to just say very simply in a nutshell, I like to start with processes. Everything we do is a process. All businesses, all products and services that any business does are delivered by a process of some kind, fulfillment process or order to cash process, whatever that is. And guess what? Sometimes those processes are not working optimally and they need to be improved. And so ultimately what Lean and Six Sigma are methods primarily to work on those processes, to analyze processes with people you work with in those processes, and you explore and confirm what those root causes might be to fix any issues that you're having, any problems or things are taking too long. How do we make it go faster? We have too many defects. How do we reduce those defects? It could be any process at all. I still have not found a process that you can't apply process improvement to unless you're God. Okay, but that's a whole nother conversation. So that's how I feel a little bit about it. Yes.
Okay, so we're using lean to basically streamline a process, make it more efficient, and to try to eliminate variation, defects in the process.
Yeah, exactly. So when people get trained on Lean or Six Sigma, they're learning about knowledge to solve issues related to processes, drilling down to root cause and not jumping to solution. I think the issue we see a lot of businesses face is people jump to solution. They're solution oriented. We're rewarded for solutions. So we're always sort of jumping to solution. And have you ever had a situation where people implemented solutions and it did not solve the problem? And what's even worse, sometimes that can be a very expensive solution. And that is a terrible thing because didn't pause long enough to really explore what the problem and the root causes of those problems were.
So Lean, yeah, absolutely. So Lean Six Sigma helps us to start at what is the problem here, and to kind of unpack, you know, what is the root cause of our issue. So, well, can you give me one concrete example of a typical inefficiency? easy, something everybody could be like, yes.
Right. So I think the typical two process issues we see how they manifest is something is taking long, a process is taking too long, like getting your driver's license permit from the DMV. As an example, we're running into that right now because my son is he's ready to be driving. I'm a little scared. I still have to go through the process, and this process is a little painful. So it's taking too long. That's a symptom of a process that might need help, or something is coming out wrong. So, oh gosh, we have defects on our glass that we're building or making. Why defects? So those are the two outcomes. So something's coming out wrong or something's taking too long. Now apply that to any process you work in or are familiar with. And you can apply process improvement methods like Lean and Six Sigma to figure out what's happening, what is the cause of that. And now more than ever with processes that are virtual, what we're seeing is people are just processes that are trying to be working virtually, and they're running issues. We had one this process example is they discovered that there was 120 emails being generated for us. They said, why are so many emails going out? This is just too much stuff. It's wasteful. Everybody has to answer these emails. So they actually redesigned the process with the idea that they didn't need this many emails going out and creating problems and creating work. So that's what we call excessive processing as an example. But there's lots of other examples. In healthcare, nurses, how many miles a day do you think a nurse walks? If you had to guess, Cindy, how many miles a day? Or let's ask the audience, how many miles a day do you think a nurse walks? Type it in the chat.
You know the answer, Tracy?
I do.
I'm going to go 7. I'm going 7. Oh, someone else went 7. Yeah.
Ali knows 7. He must know
another 7.
Well, and Cindy, you are correct. It's about 7 miles a day. And why are they walking? Why do you think they're walking? Oh, his wife is a nurse. I he knew the answer. Good. Why are they walking, Ali? What are the reasons? What are they doing? Okay, so yep, Emily's right. Inefficient layout. What else is happening? Why are they walking around so much? Is it just because they're trying to get their steps in? No.
Too many signatures.
Exercise. Somebody looking for supplies. Exactly. So you're looking for supplies. You can't find the prescription of this patient. You can't find a wheelchair. You have to restock something. All these reasons why they're walking around. Well, guess what? The more time they're walking, the less time for what? What do you think?
Taking care of the patients?
Taking care of the patients, right? So that is what we call non-value add work. The value add work is taking care of the patient. So the goal for Lean and Six Sigma is to remove the non-value add steps so you can optimize what really does bring value to the customer, whoever that customer is. So good
Tracy,
job, everybody. Yes.
Yes. I think you did. I think everybody now has a good understanding of what we're trying to do here. I know I feel better. So let's go next step. Let's go a little deeper here. Can you expand and tell me why lean leadership? Why is it even important?
Yes, I think the issue we run into sometimes is that people believe, okay, let's do Lean Six Sigma, and they believe that the one thing that they have to do is train frontline people on DMAIC or on PDCA, which these are methods for process improvement. So Lean follows plan, do, check, act. And so they train their people on this method and they think, okay, I'm done. Now go and improve. And unfortunately, leaders don't necessarily know or realize they have an impact in how much of that is actually going to be used in the future. So what are leaders doing to optimize the environment for continuous improvement? We want continuous improvement to flourish. And sometimes there are environments where it is not flourishing. How many of you online have actually had that experience where you got some training, but then you were sort of informally told, no, you can't work on that. No, I don't want you to work on that. So I'll give you an example. Yes, Cindy, has that happened to you?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yes. So
all the time.
An example is, so if you work for a high blame organization, let's say, or you work for a person that does not want people to know about your problems. So how are you supposed to start with problems with process improvement if you're not allowed to say, we got problems, right? So these are issues that a leader can actually be supporting. So they say, yes, I want you to do continuous improvement, but don't tell anybody about our problems. What? So this is where it gets confusing. And now people don't know what to do with these robust tools they were just taught because they're not allowed to do it or to apply. So that's really what we're focusing on when it comes to the lean leader. And that's an extreme case. You know, I think there's a lot of good leaders out there. There really are a lot of good leaders now, and they want to do the right thing. Sometimes they just don't know what to do. They don't really know, well, how am I supposed to be supporting this? Like, what do good look like? If I want to be a good leader in supporting this, how do I make that, how do I know I'm doing the right thing? So that's really what is being targeted when we talk about lean leadership. Does that help?
Absolutely. I think it's incredibly critical that a leadership comes in and it has to create that safe culture, right? And set up that landscape so that we can start identifying problems and working on them. If we're taught to hide them or not encouraged to bring them forth, how are we going to work on them? How are we going to use this tool? We invested in all this training, but how are we actually going to flex those muscles?
Yes.
And so actually, go right ahead.
I was just going to say, often when I work with organizations, I'm working to mentor problem solvers, but I'm also helping leaders mentor problem solvers. Because the goal is, if I'm a consultant, eventually I need to go away. And that needs to be integrated into the organization. So we're not only mentoring the problem solvers, we're mentoring the leaders on how to mentor problem solvers. That is a more sustainable way to embrace and let the culture grow. If you don't have a plan for growing problem solvers and problem solving or mentors for problem solvers, you're not going to have a sustainable culture.
Absolutely not. And why invest all that money if you don't lay down all that foundation that you need? Oh, yes. Right on, Tracy. All right. Let's go down even a little bit deeper.
Okay.
So we established why a leadership role is imperative to and to set up a continuous improvement organization. Can we now talk a little bit more about some of the important elements of this leadership role and get down a little bit more into the nitty-gritty?
Absolutely, absolutely. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here briefly and just say that these are the 4 key areas we're going to spend some time talking about right now. And these are broad on purpose because everybody, my belief is, if you're on a continuous improvement journey as a leader, as a problem solver, these are going to apply to you. And in order for you to get to the next level, what you really want to think about is, what am I doing in each of these areas to promote this even more? So someone that has been doing process improvement for 5 years, they might be doing something different to create ideal conditions than a leader who is just starting. So the idea here is that these are very broad on purpose, and we're going to cover some of these. So the first one is, the primary area of focus for a leader is to create ideal conditions for continuous improvement to thrive. What does that mean? So I can give you some examples of what that looks like, but really this is where the work comes in to say, where are we at today as an organization and as a leader, and where do I want to be? What can I do this year to create ideal conditions, or even this quarter? And so having that plan and thinking about what kinds of conditions. And so I think this is the hard part for leaders, because sometimes it means you have to assess what the current condition is. And if people are not doing process improvement on a regular basis right now, that means there's a lot of things missing, or that something is happening that is not helping create this culture of continuous improvement. And you got to figure out what it is. And guess what? It might be something you're doing. So sometimes that's not a fun reflection, right? And so this is a hard thing, because this is when people say, well, I want you to do process improvement, but I don't want you to talk about any of our problems. And you can't do that project because then everybody's going to know what our problem is. Okay, now this is confusing and that's not creating ideal conditions. So that's what we talk about with creating ideal conditions. I think the number one, I'm going to ask you guys a question. What is the number one responsibility of a leader to create ideal conditions? Go ahead and type that in the chat window for me, Angela. I'll say it again. What's the number one responsibility of a leader to create ideal conditions? Anybody want to take a stab? Let's see what people are saying.
They're coming in. Listening, be a champion, remove obstacles.
Yeah, I was going to say that one.
Support, safe environment to make mistakes, respect.
Good.
Ooh, these are good.
Influence, feedback,
Motivate,
communication, empower.
accountability.
Letting people know they have the power to solve problems. Lots of listening, feeling comfortable, learn from the team, motivate, accountability, allow to work on the solution, open-minded.
These are wonderful. Thank you. So respect is one of those things is that you really hope if a leader is a leader, they're going to respect their employees. But you know what? You're right. Sometimes the respect isn't even there. So yes, that is definitely very, very important. The other thing about process improvement is reducing fear. So often psychological safety is what somebody wrote.
Yeah.
You're going out on a limb often to say, we got problems and I have to be open about talking about those problems. And I have to know that I feel safe, that the finger isn't going to be coming out and pointing back at me, that I did something wrong. And there's a lot of people don't want to do process improvement if they're going to get the finger pointed at them. And now it becomes dangerous for them. So that is one of the number one things what we want to do is reduce fear. And many leaders don't think that there is fear in the organization. And what we find is there is fear. They just don't know about it. And if you don't know about it, and if you're not aware of it, how are you going to be able to reduce the fear? So in seeing fear, how do you change that? I'll give you an example. I was working with an organization and they were doing huddle boards and they had some metrics on this huddle board. They were just starting out with process improvement and continuous improvement. And so a lot of the boards had green, yellow, and red magnets for if they were on track or off track. Well, when they first started, I noticed that none of the boards had red. And that was very interesting because what that told me is people were afraid. They didn't want to have a red because they were somehow told, if you will, or interpreted that red is not okay. Well, if nobody can admit that there's problems that they're working on, how are we going to move forward? So now we got to address that. We have to address that before we address that people aren't using fishbone diagrams. So that's a really important part of it. So you got to make it okay. So you have to reduce fear. You have to make it okay for people to experiment. This is a great example of a leader. This is an A3. It was crumbled up and thrown in the trash can by a person who was using it, an A3 user. And the leader came and took it out of their trash can and put it on the wall and said, it's okay. It's okay to fail. That's okay. And this was on their wall. This was on their wall for 3 years to say, look, it's okay. You learned, right? Good. What'd you learn? Let's move forward. So I think that's really important characteristic of reducing fear. Is it actually okay for people to experiment? Is it okay for people to fail? And if it's not, why? And how am I contributing to that as a leader? Because you might be actually supporting that. It could be just something that the organization is doing where they're doing finger pointing and, you know, you get the whole, whose fault is it? I don't know. And then you start doing that with your people. Whose fault is it? And you don't even know you're doing it. So these are all the things that you start to want to reflect about. And ultimately, you know, this is a hard part because you're going to be looking at your culture, and culture, this is one of my favorite quotes. Culture is created by what is tolerated and what is promoted. So if it's a high blame environment, that's what's tolerated. That's what's going to create the culture. So I think one of the things that I like to remind leaders of is they have a very important role because they really tell people what to pay attention to in their behaviors, in their actions, and what they're doing is shaping the culture. So if you're not promoting or encouraging process improvement, what are you promoting? I have an example of a ref here. And the reason why is because, have you ever seen a sports game where the ref didn't call anything, right? Maybe it's your kid's soccer game, or maybe it's, going to a hockey game. The first time I ever saw a hockey game, I wasn't sure if it was about hockey or if it was boxing, because man, the ref doesn't do anything. They just let people have at it in hockey. And you're like, what's going on? They're not even playing hockey anymore. And so especially when you're watching your kids play, what if the ref doesn't call anything on, in the game? People are really upset. What happens? The game gets really ugly. And so what are we trying to, what does that mean? And so this happens in organizations too. If leaders aren't commanding respect of others as well as themselves, then the culture is going to get ugly. And that really makes it tough for continuous improvement to flourish when you have an environment like that. So I always like to have leaders ask themselves, what are you tolerating or allowing that is actually getting in the way of building a better culture? And I always like to say lean culture is healthy culture. Think about a healthy culture. And what's getting in the way? What are we tolerating as leaders that sometimes gets in the way? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And so what would you suggest would be the kind of the first step or the best approach to starting to build that culture? Do you have any quick advice?
Well, gosh, as a matter of fact, I have a slide right coming up.
No way.
So one of the things that anyone can do if you really are serious about thinking about, okay, what's really happening here? So I think the hard part is you are in your culture. So what I love about my job is when I go into different organizations, I really get to see the culture. I get to see how people treat each other. I get to see if people are fearful. When you're in that culture for 5, 10, 15 years, you become a little desensitized to that culture. And you really want to think about what culturally is happening. You have to sort of try to stand back and assess the culture a little bit. And so I like to use something called a stop, start, continue tool, just to start to think about what really needs to happen. So you can start to really observe what's happening in your own culture. And these are some of the questions. I don't know if any of you have used this before. It's a great change management tool. Anytime you're thinking about wanting to make a change, or if you're implementing a change, you can say, what do we need to stop doing? What do we need to start doing? What do we need to continue to do? So you can do it, you can use this tool in this example, and you can ask yourself, what do you as a leader, or in general, our culture, what do we need to stop doing to help create a stronger continuous improvement culture? So again, this could be where, think about, and if you guys want to put anything in the chat window, please do so. What are some things that you think your organization or your leaders need to stop doing? A good example that I've seen is people say, oh, we blame. There's still a lot of blame. There's a lot of finger pointing, as Lori says. They're always trying to find fault. And what are the things we should really stop doing that get in the way? And so there could be lots of things in there. Some people say, stop disrespecting people. Right? Stop embarrassing people. How many of you have seen people get publicly shamed? Oh, Robert, you're reading my mind. You just said shaming people. Shaming people for asking questions, right? Is that going to promote a culture of continuous improvement? And then when you recognize that, there's toxic behavior happening, and then you could say, okay, well, what do we need to start doing instead? And it could be high level. But then I always like to say, think about it from a tactical level as a leader. What can you do? So I like to look at these from the organizational perspective. What does an organization need to stop doing? And what do I need to stop doing as a leader? Because leaders hold current norms in place, typically. So they are holding those norms. So if it's a high blame organization, that means we are also contributing to that as a leader. And that's no fun to think about. I'm sorry if that's bad news for you, but the sooner you know it, the better. And then finally, what do we need to continue to do? Because you know what? There are some things, if you are on a continuous improvement journey and you are seeing results, you're doing something right. you need to recognize that. You need to recognize that the organization is doing it and you want to continue to do that. You want to leverage what you're doing well. And you need to recognize that. So there's, what do you need to stop doing? What do you need to start doing? And what do you need to continue to do? And this is, I think, a really great reflection exercise that it can be really helpful for sort of taking a step back. And what I find is leaders really enjoy this. I've done this with individuals, but I've also done it with whole leadership teams. And it is really enriching discussions. And sometimes it's the first time they've even discussed the culture and what they think is happening with their culture and how they're contributing to that. So I think, I hope it helps. So that is really the number one thing, just to wrap this up, is creating ideal conditions. There's a lot of things you can do, but it really does depend on where you are on this journey. So I don't want to be too prescriptive when saying you should do this and you should do that, because it really does depend on where you are in the journey. I see Carlos Vallejo on the line from Costco, and they're doing a great job with creating ideal conditions in their centers. They have an optical lab. And there's a lot of things they're doing. And guess what? If he wants to even really think about what other things they can do to make it ideal, his list is probably going to be a lot different than someone that's just getting started. So I hope that helps.
That I would think so. And so it's clear that we need to build the right culture and the ideal conditions, obviously, to make sure that continuous improvement can begin and flourish. So what else? So that's clearly one component for the role that a leader has to take. What else is there?
So the next one is, how do you commit to building a problem-solving muscle? So the first thing the second most important thing is committing to building problem-solving muscles. So I think the challenge is leaders are busy. Supervisors are so busy and managers are so busy, and it would be really easy to just stay very task focused and get her done, right? You want to get her done, and you want to get I'm going to stop sharing my screen for just a minute, just so we can have a conversation for a minute. But ultimately, managers and leaders are, sometimes they struggle with, okay, I got to get all this work done and I need my team to do it. And I've seen leaders struggle with, do I just get the work done, or do I spend a moment mentoring this person and helping them build their problem-solving muscle so that they can solve the problem in the future? So do you want to get the job done, or do you want to spend that time investing in people to grow them? And I see this mental frustration or question a lot. And the more leaders are aware that they're doing it, they say, okay, I want to get it done. I want to get all these tasks done, and I'm going to manage my people to do it. Or they might say, well, I'm just going to do it because it's faster. What did you just do? If you just, you handed that to somebody to do, and then you took it back because they weren't doing it fast enough. Oh, what did you teach that person? So, I think there's some big challenges with you really commit to building problem-solving muscles. So what does that mean? So I'm going to ask you guys another question. If you are a leader and you're committed to building problem-solving muscles, what are some behaviors or mindsets, a mindset or a behavior that you might do or embrace? So I'll repeat that. So if you're trying to grow problem solvers, what might you do to promote that? I want to see what people have to say about that. Let them be a problem solver, right? Reward employees for solving problems. Yes. Ask a lot of questions versus what? Because, often we're not asking enough questions. We're really more telling people what to do, right? So if you're asking questions, what we call using the Socratic method, which is ask the questions. And here's the thing too, is if you're new to asking questions, you're not going to be very good at it when you first start. Right? You tend to, what I call, lead the witness, right? So, well, have you tried this solution? Have you tried that solution? Those aren't really asking questions for them to ponder and think about. It's really more one step away from just doing it yourself. So
Yeah.
I always say, be kind to yourself. Let people know you're trying, you're working on this. You're not going to be great at asking questions at first, but a really important thing. Leaders who are building problem solvers ask more questions. They ask better questions. They listen. They let their people solve the issues as opposed to solving it themselves. So
Yes.
that's an example. Yes.
It's like, it's about empowering your people. It's a bottom-up approach to solving a problem as opposed to a top-down, here's your solution.
Exactly. And if you have leaders that are not saying, I'm committing to building problem solving, they're doing less and less of these behaviors, and they're not conscious of those behaviors. All they can think about is success is I got the job done. And they're not necessarily saying success is I'm building problem solvers. So
Yes.
that's a really important piece. And again, like I said, all of these are very broad because what you do this year might look very different for someone who has been doing continuous improvement for 5 years versus somebody who is just starting. So what will you do now in the next 3 months to commit to building problem solving muscles? And what does that look like from a behavioral perspective?
Again, it's down to building that mindset, that right mindset.
Yes. So that's the other piece is you want to commit to building the problem solving muscles. And the other piece is, sometimes leaders aren't sure what they're supposed to be doing in a day-to-day. I see that a lot. So when I'm working with organizations, I am often I'm going from giving people, helping leaders communicate the vision of process improvement in the organization, all the way down to saying, I need you to come to this kickoff meeting tomorrow. Right? So it's very tactical direction. And then there's also very broad direction. But again, and so what I find is one thing that I can think can be very helpful for lean leadership is really getting clearly defined roles and responsibilities for the leaders. What is the expectation at a high level? And what do those look like behaviorally? And getting some commitment around what those things are, I think can be very helpful for demonstrating that the leadership team is supportive of lean and process improvement. So that can be really, really important. And, I find often that leaders do want to support it. They just don't know what to do specifically. And there isn't a lot of what I would call leader standard work around doing that. So standard work is, we say it's the one best practice for doing something, and leader standard work sometimes is not across the organization. Not all leaders are doing it, or they're unclear what they should be doing as a leadership team. So creating that clarity is a really important part of good lean leadership. Would you like to see an example?
Please.
Okay,
I'm sure we
good.
all do.
I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again. So this is a real example from an organization that just wanted to have a conversation and get clarity at a high level of what leaders should be doing. And they came up with these 3 things. They said, promote a continuous improvement culture. And these are some examples. Commit some time and effort. And here's some examples of what that looks like. And then also enlist others. So always be promoting it and enlisting others. And so what does that look like? So this was just a very simple matrix for actions for a Lean Six Sigma leader. You could be removing fear in the organization, or you're tying continuous improvement to the objectives of the organization. So for example, a lot of times an organization might have a strategic goal of, improve customer experience. Well, guess what? Continuous improvement definitely supports that strategic goal. And so just reminding people that this is important to us. It helps us achieve our goals. So those are some things to think about. Commitment and time and effort. So it hurts my heart when there are organizations that are doing process improvement and they actually have these celebration sessions where they're demonstrating project success and the leaders don't show up. Like, what are you saying? You're voting, you're basically telling people it's not that important. And that is a killer. That is so this could be an example of, make sure you're attending those kickoff sessions. Make sure you're attending these sessions where we're celebrating success. Have something to say. And these are very small, but very impactful things. And again, I'm just sharing an example, and this is what worked for them at that time. So now for someone who's knee deep in 4 years into continuous improvement, they'd be like, well, we're already doing all those things. Give me something else. Exactly. So then you would have different actions for moving along the journey a little bit more. Maybe you are helping people pick projects, or maybe you've got a team of people that you're helping mentor so that they're also growing their problem solving muscle. So it just looks different depending on where you are.
Do you have a specific example?
Yes, I do. So I know this is hard to read, but this is an example from LA County. So LA County has very clear structure and roles. They came up with 8 roles for continuous improvement. And these are, some of them are positions like the department head and the chief deputy, but all the other ones, they're roles, and anyone in the organization, there are groups of people that would be assigned to these roles. So a champion, an assistant champion, a consultant meaning internal consultant. And they had defined what all these roles were because they're creating an infrastructure to support the process improvement, not just the problem solving, but the supporting of the problem solving. So it's a quick example, and we're running out of time. So I just wanted to share that. But, again, what kind of structure and role? So these are very different. This is a very high level example of saying, here's 3 things we want leaders to do, and this is what they look like. And then this is very specific. We've got 8 different positions, and they all have roles and responsibilities, but they have a very large organization. So it makes sense for them. So
is this a whole department?
Yeah. There's
dedicated just to Lean Six Sigma?
So these are different roles, and there are a number of, for example, champions and assistant champions in that organization. And some of them can be supervisors. Some of them can be the manager at the manager level. But if someone says, well, your role as a champion, read this role, these are the things you're responsible for the process improvement initiative. That's how they do it. Does that make sense?
Understood. Yep. Oh, so it looks like we have 6 minutes left, and before we open up Q&A, and obviously it's clear, I mean, we bring this up over and over again, it's very important to build that culture if you want to be successful, right? So, can you kind of walk us through quickly kind of the components that go into building a culture and kind of the strategy behind them?
Definitely. So one of the other pieces, we've been talking very tactically about what leaders specifically could do, but there's also something called the Shingo model. And it actually is it's the 4 components to consider when building a lean culture. And it's a house, and it's got 4 components. And there are, again, this came from Shigeo, and that institute of the 4 things to think about. And so what I always like to say is your role as a leader, a lean leader, is to really know what these components are and have a plan for how you're incorporating these elements into the culture. So I'll give you an example. Often what I find is when people are a little fresh to Lean Six Sigma and implementing process improvement, they're doing a lot of work in the continuous improvement floor. They're sending all their people to training, yet they really haven't done a lot of work on customer focused results, enterprise alignment, and cultural enablers. So I'm going to talk really quickly about each floor. Some of them are pretty self-explanatory, but customer focus just means you are focused on the customer. I know that sounds stupid, but there are some organizations that are not focused on the customer. They are focused on the stakeholders. Government is a great example. And I'm not saying that to poo-poo on government. They know it too. They tend to be focused on stakeholders and not customers. So how do we become more customer focused? And what things do you need to do as an organization to stay more customer focused? The other issue I run into is enterprise alignment. How do we align around a common purpose? I see people rush to talk about, we're doing Lean Six Sigma and this is how we're going to do it, but they forget to talk about why. Why are we doing Lean Six Sigma? What are we hoping to accomplish because we're implementing Lean Six Sigma? And, creating that vision and sharing that vision and communicating that vision so people see themselves in that vision. People miss that for some reason. So there is and connecting it to the strategic goals of the organization. There are so many linkages I see just by looking at an organization's strategic goals. They can easily, continuous improvement easily supports many of those goals. And so, you know, that's another piece that you do in enterprise alignment. Continuous improvement, I already talked about. That's when you're doing more of the training and you're supporting projects. And then the most important floor is the foundation of the house. And that is cultural enablers of leadership and respect. How are we as leaders promoting a culture of continuous improvement? And again, that is not cookie cutter. Culture is not cookie cutter. And I think that's one of the reasons why it fails. Everybody wants to follow Toyota and what they're doing, but guess what? Toyota has a very specific culture and you can't copy culture. It comes from leaders. And that's why I think the biggest failure has been in the past. So I know that was a quick and dirty on these 4 components. I can spend 2 days talking about talking about each of these floors, but I think the most important thing is, here's an example of a roadmap. So you can see on the left, the 4 different floors. And this was a roadmap that one of our customers actually completed quarterly to say, this is what we're going to be doing quarterly in each of these floors to promote continuous improvement. So you can see that this was started back in 2013. It was a government organization. It was an 18-month roadmap. And again, it's very high level. It's getting leaders to agree that we want to do these things. So that's very high level on Post-its, as opposed to, and then as the quarters get closer, then they start to talk about tactically, what does that plan look like? So this is really to get agreement from leadership on what you want to do. So it's really important. And I'll just say that here's some examples. I know you're not going to know what all of these things are, but here's some examples of some of the things people have put in to these different, into their roadmap based on where they are. So for example, some people didn't have a vision or a mission, and they certainly didn't have one for Lean Six Sigma. So everybody thought they were going to get fired, right? Like fear just ran rampant through the organization because nobody told them why they're doing Lean Six Sigma. And you know what happens when people don't communicate? They come up with their own ideas, and sometimes it's based on fear, and they all think, oh, they're trying to replace us all. And that may not be it at all. So these are just some examples of what sometimes people put in their roadmap for their building a culture of continuous improvement. So I know that was kind of a fire hose version there.
No,
but,
it was good. And you did it in 5 minutes, Tracy. Excellent. We're of course going to be sending out this presentation to everybody. I'm sure Shannon will be sending it. It's and yes.
Yes.
And we are, if you guys want to hear more from Tracy, which I'm sure everybody's clamoring to, we will be having a Lean Leadership course and info session coming up. If you do want to dive into a little bit more of these topics, I mean, now obviously is a great time to start thinking about operations, obviously, because I think we're all thrust into really thinking about how to reoperate due to current times. So there we'll have more information about that following, but I know we wanted to open it up to the floor. We have a really, it looks like engaged crowd out there. So I'm sure there's some questions. I don't know, Shannon, if you're going to pop in to help us.
Sure. And whoops, I don't know if you can share I'll share my screen here really quickly and just say that this is a new Lean Six Sigma leadership course. It is COVID friendly. So what that means is it is online. So you go through some online learning modules, but then you actually meet with myself and the other instructor, Elizabeth Swan, 5 times. And you also meet with everybody in the class too, in an awesome, really cool software program called Verbella, which creates a virtual environment for brainstorming. So I'm really excited to use it. And we've gotten really great feedback from other students in leadership courses on Verbella. So it's a brand new course. We're starting it on August 24th. I can't wait. And maybe you could be a part of that maiden voyage.
Oh, yes.
I actually just popped the link into the chat for everybody.
Oh, great. And just the 3D learning environment Tracy's talking about is so cool. You get to create your own student avatar and walk into a virtual campus. It is just
It is
a
pretty cool.
brand new way of connecting. Very interesting. So we're looking forward to seeing how the customer or the student likes that. Speaking of customer voice.
Somebody asked,
good.
Is this the same as the leadership coaching program?
No, it is not. So very good question, Tracy. The leadership coaching program is a little different. There are going to be probably some overlap because you are learning how to coach employees specifically for problem solving. So, but you're probably following very familiar coaching best practices when you coach someone. So there is some overlap, but it's definitely not the same. I also saw that someone said, the more ice cream socials, the less lean an organization is going to become. We on that roadmap, there was an ice cream social on there. And what they discovered is they weren't really having fun anymore in their organization, and they wanted to insert a little more fun. And the leadership team started brainstorming ways to do that. So they were purposely putting in pancake breakfasts and ice cream socials and those kinds of things because they just had gone away from that and people were not having fun at work. And they just like an important thing for them to address. So that's why ice cream socials was on that roadmap. Okay.
So somebody asked, what's the difference between yellow, green, and black belt?
Very good question. So this is related to the different belts. And they've stolen that analogy from karate. Like karate, it's supposed to indicate your levels of expertise and knowledge. But in this case, a yellow, green, or black belt, it's really telling you how much you can cut through waste with your skills and knowledge. And so yellow is the first level, followed by green. And in order to get a black belt, you have to have a green belt. So unless you do the combo course. So it's really just a different levels of experience. I hope that helped.
It helped me.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Somebody asked, can we talk about why it's so important to try to get everyone lean trained and lean conscious minded, even if not a leader?
Yes. So, that's a great question. And there's probably a lot you could say to that. And I'd love to hear what other people have to say. I always like to say a lean leader and a lean culture is a healthy culture, right? So you're addressing the things that need to be addressed. You don't have dysfunction so much so that it's debilitating in your organization. People aren't afraid to solve problems and work together. Ultimately, it's for the good of the company, the organization, the good of the employees. What we're finding is there's a strong correlation between when you're trying to implement process improvement, there's a strong correlation between process improvement traits of a leader and employee engagement. So a lot of the things that, if you want high employee engagement, and you are not doing process improvement and you're trying to do process improvement, a lot of those skills are going to increase employee engagement is what we're finding. There's a strong correlation. So why would you not want engaged employees? And so I hope that addresses it to a degree. Okay, so let's see.
Any other questions out there? We have a couple more minutes. I thought the people were starting to promote their karate belts. So it was good to answer that question about our various belts that we have.
Yeah. And, I would love it if nobody has other questions. I would love to hear, so all of you, many of you maybe are doing process improvement. Do you think your leaders are doing really good jobs? Do you think there is room for improvement? Or do you think that your leaders aren't doing a very good job? I'd love to hear, what your thoughts are on the need for people becoming better Lean Six Sigma leaders, if you want to comment any of that. Yep, we have someone that says, yes, there's always room for improvement. I agree. I mean, and it's good to be humble. I think being humble as a humble leader, you're going to want to become better and better and better. So someone wrote, I think my company's biggest challenge is speaking up. Yes, that indicates to me fear. If a fear is driving in an organization, people don't want to talk. They don't want to bring things up. And so they just sweep it under the rug. And guess what? Then people disengage. All right.
Somebody said if a person brings up an issue, you give them a task to fix it. But what if it is an issue that affects more than just the team, isn't a larger issue?
Yes. So I think that's a great response too. And so I feel like that's what happens if you're not building problem solvers, you have to have all the answers. And if you're always telling people what to do, they're not thinking for themselves. They know that you're going to do the thinking and they're not going to do it themselves. And then when you've got complicated problems across an organization, you don't have teams that can work well together because they haven't had to. So it's really important for leaders to really get behind problem solving. Lynn writes,
Oh, go ahead.
Oh,
Lynn writes, shout out to Costco for how they responded to COVID-19. As a customer, I've been impressed with the changes they've made. Very great. That's awesome. So I'm throwing that out to you, Carlos.
yeah, I second that. Lovely experience every time.
Somebody asked, is leanness measurable? And if so, what are some of the indicators or metrics of it?
Yes. So again, a more indirect measure is employee engagement, but that's to me longer and further down the line for seeing if you are having an improvement. Ultimately, it's around, a lot of people sometimes measure people that are trained. I don't like to actually measure that because I think ultimately you want them to do something with that training. You want them to get results. So I like to say how many ideas are being implemented, how many improvements are being implemented, because that means people are actually doing something. Count that. Count when people are actually engaging. I also see that someone wrote, what role does a frontline supervisor play in promoting a lean culture? That is one of the most important roles because you are so close to the problem solvers and you want to be able to mentor them. So executives, really high level executives, I mean, sometimes they could go, thou shalt go, we're going to do Lean Six Sigma, make it happen. Okay. But a supervisor, they actually have to help coach their employees to do problem solving. And so they often need more training on how to do that. And that's where we really are focusing on the Lean Six Sigma leader training. I hope that helps. How can we get our company leaders to learn this stuff? That is a really great question. And it breaks my heart. It's surprising how many people are not doing process improvement still, believe it or not. And it's very difficult if you don't have leaders that don't already see the value. I'm going to tell you something. It's probably not the greatest, but someone asked Jack Welch that very question and said, you know, my leaders are not supportive of process improvement. And do you know what his answer was? Go find another place to work. So he said, you know what, you're not going to be able to convince everybody. And why make it, you know, swimming against the current. Go find a place that is going to want you to do that, because clearly you're just going to be frustrated. So I hope didn't sound too bad, but it's true.
We are almost at noon. So it's that how can I have Tracy's job? Awesome. That's a great one to end on. I love it.
Not all teachers
has so much fun. Well, I want to thank Tracy and Cindy for their time today, for sharing their expertise with us, for having this very important conversation. We are so thrilled to be able to share this with all of you, and we hope that you will join us for some future sessions. I just wanted to make sure you did know that the webinar series is continuing on. I am popping the link into the chat box just so you all can access it if you want future webinars. Again, this recording will be available in the next week or so up on that website and in your inbox if you attended. And we will be sharing the PowerPoint and resources for those that attended as well, so check your inbox. Thank you again to everybody for attending. Please continue to stay well. And again, thank you, Tracy and Cindy. And we will sign off for today.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.